Mr. Chair, would you like to call this meeting to order at 2:08 p.m.?
Yes, please. Call to order.
Great. I would like to introduce you all to someone, and she's not joining. She's actually not able to communicate with you because of some technology limitations, but I at least want you to know that she's joined us on the call. We have been able to hire on a temporary basis Connie Madden. Connie has a long history in executive assistance, office management, human resources. Really has done a lot in the business world, and has decided to come back and work at the area development district in a number of capacities. She recently helped with a complete overhaul of one of our billing systems for our human services division. And she has very graciously agreed to help us out here in Workforce for at least until December, and hopefully even moving past that a little bit. And so she is going to be taking minutes today, which is the best thing ever. So I hope you all have an opportunity to meet Connie in person. But I did want to let you know that she has joined us in this meeting.
Welcome, Connie.
Hello, Connie.
And John, for your knowledge, Connie wrote a message in the chat and said, "Good afternoon, John." Did anyone need to self-identify today? Okay, everyone is shaking their head, so no one self-identified. So,
all right.
Mr. Chair, the next item on your agenda is approval of the minutes from August 25th, 2020.
Thank you. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Okay, I'll do that.
So we'll go with Nick as the motion.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Nick. Okay. Okay. Do you guys want to vote?
Oh, sure.
Sure. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any objection? No? Then motion passes.
I wanted to bring to your attention I hope you can, I know John cannot bring it onto his screen, but those of you that are in front of a screen, we had talked about this last time we joined together, that Dr. Carissa Schutzman, who was formerly with Thomas More University, she actually had a short interim period, and I think that's when we last met, that she had started her own consulting firm. But she has actually since then, she has gone to University of Cincinnati, where she is in a role of evaluation and research. And so she's continuing to, work in applied research and education, public health, social justice for both higher education institutions as well as public school systems, public health entities, and community-based organizations. And so because of the nature of our bylaws, saying that, if someone would leave their present, employment position, that they would, need to leave the board. Therefore, it's necessary for Dr. Schutzman, who, by the way, as a reminder, is the secretary of the board, to have a new nomination form. So I am sorry to not get this to you all earlier, but I'm comforted by the fact that this is something that we've talked about now, already. The biggest question that I had, and I'm hoping to lean on the experience of those of you in the room, Dave, I'm kind of looking at you in particular, is in terms of, so she would stay under the education category that she's currently in. So it would not change any of the ratios, of our required membership. But I don't really know how to classify this. Is it a new nomination? Is it a term renewal, which now I'm thinking maybe we should have been doing term renewals, or, I don't think it's a replacement. So I guess it's a new nomination, but I don't know. It doesn't feel like any of those. And so I just thought I talked to John about this earlier today, and I just kind of wanted to, so that box is not checked for a reason, because I was not sure how to counsel Dr. Schutzman about how to fill that, how we should fill that part out.
Well, you must have picked up the vibe, because I was wondering about that as you were introducing her. What did we decide, Tara, about the way that my term was adjudicated? How did that actually happen?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I should have done this before. I know that in terms of the sort of practical day-to-day side of your nomination, Dave, it's like, and John was handled the same, new job, like starting over with like you're in your first term again.
Okay.
So it wasn't like you sort of replaced yourself. I mean, it was truly like a whole nother, sort of like a new you to some degree, in terms of how the terms are, outlined in the grid. I did resend that number 4 as a PDF. I don't remember that ever happening before with it being locked, but I did send you guys the grid with, so, if you look, for example, at the grid under, line, 30 for Dave Fleischer for a moment. So it actually says that your first term would end June 30th of 2021, which means that I don't know why it has an NA in your first term, but that would basically be your first term. So it looks to me like it just was completely starting over, which would lead me to think that precedent would say that was a new nomination.
Okay.
Like Dave Fleischer as Alpha Beta, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as John and I discussed, it's not completely clear in the bylaws. So I just thought that, if I had a question, we might as well just kind of make sure everybody was okay with that.
Tara, is there a way to pull the bylaws up as a screen share so we can look at what this is? So while Tara's doing that, what she and I discussed was that the precedent, at least recent precedent that we could think of, this has always been a reset by assuming that it's not the individual that joins the board, it's the combination of the individual at the institution that they are working for. So that part is clear. The question is, just because that's how we've done it last time, as we've learned recently, we haven't always done it correctly. So what I wanted to do was use this as an opportunity to review this to see if the bylaws give us the answer to this question, so we can set the right precedent moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, John. I think, do the bylaws define new nomination or term renewal or replacement at all?
So can you see my screen?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you look here under C, it talks about appointments and replacements. So it says that, it talks about the judges designating the Clio, and that, that's eventually that person has to sign off on new members, which we do that after the board votes. It talks about the different categories here. Vacancies shall be filled in the same manner as the original appointment, and replacements would serve the remainder of the unexpired term, which is, I don't think, how we've necessarily been, doing that. But
actually, Tara, can you pause there for 1 second? So that's a great observation. We just had a replacement for Tank, right?
Yes. So technically, Tank does not have. Oh, go ahead.
Or we can pick a different example if you'd like. But I actually I think in that case, Andy had his full term had expired, so that wouldn't be a case where someone left mid-term. I'm just wondering if we can find an example of where that happened. Let's just see if we did that correctly.
Right. Yeah, so I think if I'm recalling, we didn't set Gina up as a replacement only because, so Tank doesn't have a required spot on the board. So, you know, like if, okay, Danita, you know, and now looking at it, I don't know that we really did, we could revisit Danita's term because actually Danita was replacing Natalie, who has to be on our board because they represent adult education. Based on this, Natalie moved into a new job, so we should have filled that role, you know, like with wherever Natalie was in her term, theoretically. It gets a little tricky because sometimes we have people that, you know, their position really needs to be on the board all the time. And so if they run out of, you know, if they're on the board for 6 years, it's sort of like, well, okay, well, who's going to fill that role when they're, you know, if they term out?
Tara.
Yes.
John, can I ask a question? So I'm looking at the grid and I see a number of board members who in front of the first term column, it says midterm, and she's one of them that on 9/12/2017, she was midterm, and then her first term is 7/1/2018. Is that just because everybody's term starts in July? No, that's not true either.
Yeah. This is this document that I inherited, right? And I've never taken the midterm out.
Okay.
But I don't know why those are there. So I don't know if I was trying to figure out, was that supposed to be some sort of indication of when they joined? And so, but then you like then you sort of date it to when should have started, or is that some other?
Is that filling an unexpired term?
But like,
but it doesn't. It's not. I
don't know.
It's not consistent because if you look at mine, the midterm date and my first term coincide. Not all of them do.
Yeah, hold on just 1 second. Let me let John in.
Am I looking at the right, while we're doing that, am I looking at the right document? It's an Excel sheet that's got the tabs for the board and all the committees at the bottom.
You should probably be it should say number the number 4.
Oh, okay.
Point WIOA, and I resent it, Dave. I'm sorry, with the as a PDF.
Okay, I see it. I see it now. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
By the way, the document wasn't locked, Tara. It just was in the wrong tab.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can see the
I
Excel
thought
file.
it was.
Just, you had to go back to the correct tab, which was out of view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought it was an empty file when you sent it the first time last week. I wasn't going to say
You
it.
just downloaded ransomware. So
yeah.
We all owe Tara $50.
Well, I tried one time and sent Tara a note.
And then you got a PDF to see everything is fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I don't know why that happened. Sorry.
Yeah, we talked about getting rid of the midterm column, by the way, because it's sort of got no value. So this was a cleanup task that I had offered to take on and just haven't done yet. I
think if I could just interject, the midterm was because historically, it was always hard to fill a role or a need on the board 6 or 7 years ago. Maybe not today, but a long time ago, it was more difficult to recruit. And the midterm gave everybody a chance to kind of think about how this was going to happen. The board didn't move as efficiently as it does now also, so it took just a little bit longer. So the midterm kind of gave some lead time to the board, the personnel that were responsible for recruiting at the time. I think that's why it's in there. It's just a place marker.
Okay.
Okay.
It certainly hasn't helped us in our meetings and discussions, so that's why we talked about making this form a little more visually friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, we can definitely just, I mean, maybe moving forward. I think the biggest thing from in terms of precedent is if we have somebody that we need to fill like in the middle of, you know, if we're thinking terms are July to June, you know, then I think we just need to stipulate like what do we do if somebody joins in September? Like are they technically still in that term that's July to June, you know? And it's just not really clear. There's not really anybody left that remembers that. So
I mean, it would make sense to me that you wouldn't want everybody on the same expirations. You could, because you're going to end up with waves.
right. Just like we are going to have this June where 6 people are going to term out.
Yeah.
So to me, it doesn't bother me if we say, look, this person joined in September, their term will expire 2 years from now, the first term in 2 years from now in September. I mean, but then that would kind of also remove the need for like filling a vacancy, you know, in a midterm. I mean, you would just say, look, the term is for 2 years from whenever it is that you start.
I think as simple as we can make it, the better, just so that we don't. So, I mean, if we want to adopt a rule that says when you rejoin, you just start as a new term, that might be very simple and a really easy rule to enforce, along with it meets Dean's criteria of making sure that we don't have everybody that terms out at the same time, like we do now. The only thing that I worry about, and I'm just bringing this up, not in spite, but just bringing it up for conversation, is that if Carissa is a new member or joins, she's also already part of the executive board. Does that create some concern or conflict if she's going to get a new term and then be on the executive board for potentially maybe 3 to 4 years longer than normal? Would that be a problem, or is that something that we need to even address?
Let's go down. That's a good question. Let's go down here to officers for a second. So the officers of the board shall initially serve for a 2-year term with a subsequent, that's like in the very beginning when the board was constituted. So thereafter, officers of the board will be elected biannually. Each officer should hold office for 1 year or until a successor shall have been duly elected and qualified. Okay, well, we didn't do that. Yeah, and then
how do you elect biannually but serve for a 1-year term?
I don't know. That I haven't noticed that before. I've been going by the biannually and then like thinking that we would be having new officers slate elected like this coming June or like in advance of the, you know, the transition. I don't know how you serve a 1-year term if you're elected every 2 years. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, wait. I'm reading that as that they serve a 2-year term with the option for a subsequent 1-year term. So maybe it's where we can't find a qualified person that we keep the continuity of the board
Yeah.
while we look and develop a succession plan.
Or in the case of an organization like Brighton Center, where they have a change of leadership, I think Tammy is staying on her board, optional 1-year term, just to be a resource.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think I saw that happen on the educational committee too. Northern Kentucky Educational Group.
Oh, okay.
So I think Dean's observation is probably correct.
It does
Is
also
that
say,
best solved as a bylaw or a best practice?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking the group.
Okay.
I mean, one thing that we've tried to do in this is just clean up our bylaws and make sure that there's not confusion, there's not redundancy or conflict. So it sounds like we've just stumbled across another one of those instances.
Except to the point, John, that where Dave makes the point here that some of these groups that have the designated positions or seats, maybe it's to help them. I don't know.
Well,
it is a little bit muddy, but
I mean, specific to Dave's question, what I would interject is that having a seat on the executive committee is not a birthright. So I would make sure that we would want to address if someone is leaving and sort of replacing themselves, that we do have language that they are then reconfirmed in their either chairpersonship or as an officer. I think that has to be, if we're talking about this as a new member coming on, which is what we're saying, and a new term, then effectively they've lost that position. So we need to make sure that the bylaws reflect that they are reaffirmed in that as the successor.
That's
so that can be a formality because it's sort of stated in here that is the possibility. But it doesn't mean that in Carissa's case, for example, that she's now guaranteed 2 more years as secretary. So she would have to be, reelected to that position if that's what she wanted to do. And obviously that was what the will of the board was via the nominating process.
I think that's a good idea, John. I like the way that you voiced that, just to have that reconfirmation of the role if it's in the situation like Carissa finds herself in. And then the fact that you're elected in, biannually, then that also satisfies my question, I think.
Okay.
Great.
So would you mind highlighting that?
Yeah.
The one, each officer shall hold office. I think that's really the only one that's one more sentence down. That each officer shall hold office for 1 year. We just need to clean that language up. But the successor piece is certainly, yeah. The second one's fine, Tara.
Oh, okay.
That they're eligible to succeed themselves once in their current office.
So I am taking the liberty. I was going to say, I'm taking the liberty of highlighting that sentence because it's going to come into play later in our conversation today.
All right. Foreshadowing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So make sure that can I unshare my screen for a second so I can see you guys? Okay. Oh, wait, let's see. Yeah, stop. Okay. Okay. So I just want to make sure I understand. So what I think I'm hearing is that while someone, if they're a new appointment to the board, kind of in their new role, while that can happen, the officer process, we're going to kind of keep separated, where they would then also have to be re-elected into that post, and they would continue to follow the rules governing officers in terms of how long they could be in that office. Is that accurate?
Maybe. So I think the point about the role of the officer has a term. So if you are leaving, if you're vacating your board position in a midterm, a successor would be appointed to fill that remaining term.
Okay.
And
So
in Chris's case, it's the same human, but it's a unique combination of person and institution.
okay. So just reaffirming that the executive committee still
Yeah,
feels
I wouldn't want
comfortable.
this to go back to the board as a vote. I don't think we need to
Right.
bother the board for that because they've
And
already.
Yeah.
Yeah, John used the language of reaffirm, which I think is fine. I think
Okay.
that's more than a vote.
Cool. I think Chris has joined us. Chris, are you there?
I'm here. My apologies. I had a meeting I could not get out of, and it just finished. So sorry I'm late.
That's okay. We've been having a riveting conversation about the bylaws. So I actually love these. So, okay. So, Mr. Chair, I know you're back in your office now. We were talking about a particular nomination.
Right.
Did you have any other questions about, or did anybody have any other questions about that nomination?
Well, I sort of hijacked your review thread of how we would do this. Are we saying we do not have, there's not specific language in the bylaws that would say whether this is a restart or not?
I did not come across any while we were sharing the screen.
Okay.
That really specified one way or the other.
Okay, then I would suggest that as we have established precedents from at least two people, both of whom are in this meeting today, that we have that in the minutes as that shall be precedent moving forward, that the terms restart anew so that they may continue on the board as per the bylaws.
Okay. Thank you very much. That is very helpful. So I will mark this down as a new nomination and get all the appropriate appointment information from I believe this one would come from the chamber. And then pending approval by the full board, then we take it to the CLIO if you decide to vote in that way.
Do we need to vote at this meeting to bring that nomination forward?
You do.
Okay, thank you. So can I get a motion to approve Carissa for nomination to the full board?
So moved.
A
Was
second?
Dean?
That was Dean. A second, please.
Second.
Dave?
And now you need to vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Motion passes.
Great. Thank you all so much. Let's see. So it's okay. We're doing good on time.
Okay.
So the next thing on your agenda is reviewing. This is a standing item on the agenda to review the membership required for representation on the WIB and committees. And that's reflected in that number 4 analysis sheet that actually everybody's kind of been looking at already. If you'd like, I can kind of take you through it. Nothing has changed since, well, the last time you met. Let's see. I think we have some newer members, but if I'm not mistaken, last time we didn't have any new individuals. So I think it should be as you saw it last time. But if you'd like, I can bring it up and you can look at it, or you can look at it independently, whatever you prefer.
You're saying since, just to make sure I understand correctly, since our last meeting, there have not been any membership changes.
That's right. So we had four new individuals that were confirmed to the board at the July meeting, and they're now on the board and active. But otherwise, you haven't had any changes. So right now, as it stands, in the labor and training section, You have to have a minimum of 20% of the board in that section, and you are at 22.22%. And then in the business sector representation, you need a minimum of 51%, and you're currently standing at 52.78%. So you are meeting both of those categories. In terms of representation from all the counties, we are still lacking an individual who lives or works in Pendleton County. We have some individuals that their work takes that, like, has an office in that county. So Community Action Commission has an office in Pendleton County, as does Kentucky Adult Education. I'll be updating Carissa's information with UC, so that dot for Pendleton County will come off. And I gather that St. Elizabeth has a location there, but none of those people are really actively, personally working in those offices. And so I did just want to bring to your attention that, like we did when I was kind of early on in my time as director, adding, actively recruiting someone, working with the local judge executive in Carroll County to try to recruit someone who was a member of the community there. I would recommend to this group that, as we think about a number of individuals who will be terming out, in the next 6 months at the end of June, I would recommend to the board that we do a similar recruitment process for Pendleton County, so that we have someone who is actively living and working in that community and really knows it well.
Agreed.
Okay. Let's see. In terms of industry sectors, you've discussed this in the past. We're doing well with IT, business, operations, and finance, and transportation, logistics. We have a few representatives from advanced manufacturing, 3 specifically. We remain with only 1 in healthcare and 1 in construction trades. So Jamie Parsons from St. Elizabeth in the healthcare side, and Brian Bozeman, who's one of our new members on the construction trades sector. Those are our identified in demand industry sectors that are the focal point for when we're thinking about directing people into high demand jobs. So I would also, while we're in compliance, it's not necessarily a compliance issue, but I think from a best practices standpoint, it would be good to be thinking about individuals maybe in those 2 categories, and as well as advanced manufacturing, actually, who, as we have openings, that those would be sectors to focus on. Not that we have any openings at the moment, but that we know that we will, at the end of the fiscal year, at the end of June. That's all I really have in terms of an update, unless anyone had any questions about that grid.
Well, I do have a question. I see that Rhonda is going to term out. Is that correct?
That is correct. So Rhonda Whitaker, Michelle Tyson, let's see, Christy Henry, let's see, Michelle Sesteric, and I'm sorry, Dana's is blue, but that's not correct. I apologize for that. Dana Dobbs's should not be blue. Her term expires in 22. Ryan Henson and Chad Day will all be ending their 3rd term on June 30th, 2021.
But Dana is relevant, though, because her term as chair will expire, correct?
That is correct. So based on my understanding of the biannual elections, the membership and board operations committee, and hand in hand with the executive committee, would be electing a new slate of officers at the end of this period. It is my understanding. There's actually not any documentation of when each person took on their respective roles. So maybe they're staggered in a way that I'm not familiar with, but I know that both Dana and Michelle, their terms will be ending. And I may be wrongly, but I thought that they would all be expiring. It would kind of make sense to have, well, I could see it going either way, but I was thinking that they were all just every 2 years, new officers were elected. Which was a brilliant segue, by the way, into something that we need to talk about, Dave, which is that officer situation. John, do you want me to explain the situation with Michelle?
Well, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you can try to explain it.
I can try. Well, right. I can attempt to explain it. So, so we talked about this very briefly the last time that this committee gathered. So that was in August. And I had noticed in preparation for the meeting, so just, a week or two prior, that we did have this pretty high number of individuals and individuals who have either leadership roles like Michelle Tyson and Michelle Sesteric, as well as people like Rhonda Whitaker, who obviously have, such a high level of connection in our community. And we talked about it just a little bit last time, because that's how we came to decide that tomorrow, you all are all invited to you should have received the invitation to the executive committee meeting to have a conversation about legacy planning. And so I had an opportunity to talk with Dana Dobbs about this, and specifically about the fact that Michelle Sesteric's term was ending, and that I was surprised by that, because since she's vice chair, I had assumed that she would be in a situation where, the vice chair would be able to succeed and become the chair. Well, Dana indicated to me that she thought that that was the case as well. She was very surprised, and I would say disappointed, is fair to say, that she did not realize that Michelle would not be able to succeed her. And she actually specifically said that she had thought she had made sure that somebody who could, be in that, next in line would have been in the vice chair role. And so I had a chance to just reach out to Michelle and ask about it. And she explained to me that Barb had told her that because she was going to be in a leadership role, she could just go ahead and be chair. And that's how Michelle remembers it. And so I wanted to try to get in touch with Barb prior to this meeting, but unfortunately I wasn't able to do that. I did reach out to Jason Ashbrook to ask if he knew anything about that. I have scoured the bylaws, and I really don't see anything that would lead me to think that if somebody was already in a leadership role so that's why I said foreshadowing, or you said the foreshadowing. So I can, here, I can share my screen again, to show you what I was referring to here. But, so it says all officers shall be eligible to succeed themselves once in their current office. And that's one of those things where, like, what does once mean?
Exactly. Does that mean one time or upon?
Right. Yes, exactly. So that is the only sentence in the entire set of bylaws. I have read them so many times that gives me any pause about, well, maybe somebody misunderstood, or maybe that's the intent of that sentence. So anyway, I can leave it up if you want to read it, but so So it sort of leaves us in an unusual situation where I will say Michelle was very gracious and just said, look, she was looking forward to being chair, but that if it doesn't seem like that's going to be workable based on the reading of the bylaws, I think it's unusual that it doesn't seem like anybody knows anything about sort of how this happened. It occurred to me, like on the way to here to be on this meeting, that maybe I should have asked Andy Aiello. Maybe he would know. But I'm happy to get in touch with Barb and see if she'll call me. Try again to see if she could call me to, just see what she remembers about it. So we sort of have one of two situations. Either there is some path that is unclear what it would be that would allow Michelle to have another term, or then we are in a situation where we're going to need to find a successor to Dana because her term as chair, I believe, is coming to an end. Now, based on some of the things we talked about today, if you can succeed yourself once in your office, theoretically, if you wanted to vote for Dana to be in again, then that would theoretically be a possibility. But anyway, I know it's just like wonky thing, but that's where we are. John, how was that?
Well, I think you summed up exactly what's running through my head on this. Can you pull up on the bylaws where it talks about the terms and the maximum?
Absolutely. This part with the term of office for officers?
Where's the 3 terms of 2 years?
Yeah, so that is in my understanding of reading that was that
Oh, there it is, terms of office. So
new members,
2 additional 2-year terms. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second paragraph in section B. So, yeah, I mean, frankly, it was also my understanding with Michelle, and that was sort of what she and I had talked about when I took over her chairperson role here for this committee.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like that was the succession plan. I was not, though, paying attention to when her term expired completely from eligibility for board membership. So it's disappointing, and I think Michelle is regardless of her role as chair or not, she's a really good member for this WIB.
Yes.
But I just simply, to Tara's point, I don't see how she can continue in the same capacity, unless she formed Michelle Board Chair LLC and we reappointed her. That does, though, still feel like kind of a technicality way of.
Right.
But I mean, those are. I mean, Dave had a real job change. I had a real job change. Support's totally different. I mean, it's not. It wasn't a technicality.
Right. Michelle did mention to me, and speaking of technicality, she's, for example, very involved in the chamber. And after this, immediately following this meeting, I'm going to be joining a committee that she chairs around workforce strategies at the chamber. And, so she sort of said, what if somehow she was a member of the board, like representing that work? And I said, it's going to be a little tricky, but I thought I would at least mention that. So it's hard because it's not necessarily an employer. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That technically wouldn't be her employer for record, so it
Right.
becomes that technicality again. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like this is kind of a surprise to all of us. So happy to hear any thoughts about, other ideas of how to sort of solve the situation. If it's like John, like you said, I mean, I and Nick, I definitely, you know, love having the attorney in the room to read through the bylaws, but having read them, I mean, except for that one sentence, I just don't see anything. So then we get into legacy planning and how do we, you know, move forward from that.
So let me ask you this. Oh, sorry, Nick, I didn't realize there was a question to you.
Oh, Tara, was there a question there? Because
I don't know, just in case you had any other thoughts more than anything.
No, I mean, the bylaws say what they say. If our 6 years is coming up, I think our only avenue would be a creative solution. Like John indicated, you know, if Michelle were to start her own consulting company and we reappointed her in that capacity, yeah, it's a workaround, but it's also credible. But I mean, short of something like that, I don't know that there's really a path forward here.
And I think to that point, with respect to her work at the chamber, that's not the institution she's tied to. I mean, that's not how I'm on Gateway's board, but I'm not here at the WIB on behalf of Gateway because I'm not staff. So I don't think we can get that creative. Let's put it that way. I like that. I like that term, Nick, by the way.
What's that?
When a lawyer says we can get creative, that just tells me there's another word that might come to mind for that. But
yeah. So as far as Dana's position, she could extend for another year. Is that correct? Based on what we read about the bylaws, an optional 1 year, right?
Yeah, I'll pull that back up, but I believe that's the case.
Okay.
in her officer role, you're talking about, Dave?
Yeah, that's her office role. If she's willing to do that.
Yeah, so she has 1 more year on the WIB as a board member.
Right.
And it says, the officers of the board shall serve for a 2-year term with a subsequent optional 1-year term.
Okay. So if Dana is willing to extend that for 1 more year.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dave, but is that a reference to, it says shall initially, is that a reference to when the board was constituted? Because it says thereafter, officers of the board shall be elected biannually.
I still think we're talking about a 2-year. I mean, are we nominating officers every year?
No, we're not.
Yeah,
We're doing it every
these
2
are 2-year
years.
terms, and that's why we got to fix that first highlighted sentence. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it says all officers shall be eligible to succeed themselves once in their current office, which is extremely
I don't know what I mean.
confusing.
Well, I think also there's a lack of specificity on the optional 1-year term. Like, whose option is it? Is it board option or is it self option? So, you know, if I'm the board chair, do I get to say I want to stay for a 3rd year, or am I allowed to because the nominating committee has asked me to?
Good question.
I would say this has been worded in such a way that this committee and the executive committee could make a determination of how we're going to abide by the way we read it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's ambiguous enough. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, it kind of does say that, doesn't it, Nick?
Yeah.
We can add another once in there somewhere and change the whole meaning of it.
Yeah.
So if Michelle was to follow through and rotate off, when is the next opportunity for her to be reelected? Does she have to wait a year or 2 years, or is there language to that?
I don't believe that I have seen any language about that.
So does that mean that if her term expires that she can re-up automatically?
We would have to just renominate her then, if that's what you're suggesting, Dave.
Yeah, right.
That's valuable.
It's a good point. I'm scrolling up to see. I highlighted that one section in teal because that's how that will work with Carissa. So sorry if that was confusing. Yeah, I don't see anything that pertains to what happens when the person's term is over with regard to like if they would be able to serve again.
Well, I mean, the question came up last time on Ryan Henson. He's been on the board longer than anybody I think I've ever known. But it's his role and his job.
Right.
So to me, it seems like in some cases a rollover is acceptable. And I would also think that in smaller communities where you don't have such a talent pool for the WIB, that rollover is almost needed in some of these counties where these districts where there's a very small talent pool. I wonder if Michelle could just reapply. Dana could continue on. And then maybe after a year, then Michelle succeeds if that's the direction of the board.
But would you need Dana to continue for that year though? She could actually still move forward as planned if she's renominated and becomes chair immediately too. I mean,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think we would need to necessarily change what people have had in their mind as the plan.
Right.
So I mean, honestly, David, it seems like you found the solution to this problem. This is getting a little bit into a philosophical approach to this. Are we trying to create rules to prevent this from being mismanaged? Or are we evolving into more of a discussion strategically about how to run this better? And that's a little bit what we want to get into after this in terms of these departures and how to better avoid waves of mass departures and also vacuums of leadership.
Well, I think that's a question for the executive board clearly. I think the MBO should present options, okay, and solutions. But philosophically, I think the executive board has to answer that question that you just posed, John, because it's a true scenario. I mean, we could take the point of following the bylaws directly and jeopardizing some of the gains if we're inserting folks that are not up to speed or not capable. But at the same time, strategically, you know, if we've got momentum or we've got leadership that we're developing, you know, over the next 5 years, we have to be able to think through that. So I think that's a great question that you pose for the executive board tomorrow to leave them with, frankly.
Okay.
I would just add that I think we have to look at it too from the point of what is the spirit of the terms? Is the idea that this board does not become a group of people who have been on for so long that they ultimately have power and control to push their will as a group forward and not be able to be reflective of what's needed in the community. And we have to ask ourselves, if we take short-term gains, are we jeopardizing what was the original spirit and the intention of these bylaws from both WIOA and the local changes that have been made and adopted over the years?
Yeah.
So it is complicated.
That's a great point, Dean. I mean, we've always struggled with the good old boy scenario. Mm-hmm. And what you just suggested is exactly a pathway that we could end up on. very easily.
Yeah.
So do we need to have a recommendation, or are we just going to have a dialogue tomorrow, Tara?
It's fine if you just want to have a dialogue tomorrow. Let me just do a little bit of math here. So we're currently in October. So okay, so October, November, we'll have a full WIB meeting. We'll have another working meeting. Right? WIB. You guys are frozen.
You
guys
were
still
frozen.
there? I was. I
Yeah,
was
you
frozen.
were
I'm sure I had
talking
a weird
very
look on my face
slowly.
too. Okay, WIB, and then okay, April. Committee. Sorry. All right, and then in May. So there was a mention in the bylaws that the about the vote, and I need to refresh my memory about exactly how a vote would be. But if you would imagine that like a slate of officers would technically be voted in, you know, at the May meeting in advance of, you know, having a new fiscal year starting in July, then that means that you would have the December, February, and April meetings to conduct conversations like this and to figure out next steps. So you're still frozen again.
I can.
Did you hear what I said? So anyway, you have
Good.
3 more meetings to be able to put together a slate. Did you hear me,
Well,
John?
should we kind of talk about where the void is coming up, or where the challenge? Because I think now that Michelle is a potentially safe bet to move forward, this is not as bad as we were first thinking, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on your thoughts about Dean's comment, I think, about.
I think Dean's comments are appropriate, and I think, John, your comments are appropriate. How do we view this as short-term versus long-term and strategic in nature? I think that's the real question. But yeah, we can provide a solution to the problem tomorrow.
Well, let's talk about your point about, you know, proposing questions, but also providing options. What would be an elegant solution that backstops the ability from, you know, a select few that hold positions of power from always maintaining that, but still providing, well, let me finish the thought, but still providing the ability to leverage strategic decision making and how you build the board. So it's almost like, what is our minimum threshold to prevent this from going off the rails, but yet encouraging the right makeup, you know, in terms of what we talked about over for the board in general, but applying that to the leadership as well, which is diversity of location by our counties we represent, diversity of industry, diversity by gender and race, you know, reflection of our community that we serve. That's the board we want. That is our mission from this committee, is to make sure that we are looking for that, and the board that we have are active and engaged members is really the focus of our job here, is to be the, both audit committee from the rules perspective, but also the stewards of the values we're trying to uphold as a board. But the challenge we started to run into here is when the leadership team, the executive committee, or chairs, however you want to look at that, when they all term out at the same time, you've created a problem. So that particular problem, that was something that I was hoping to address more from a via thoughtfulness and awareness, because this sort of just, we weren't paying attention to it. So how do we make sure we pay attention to it, that we don't have half of the leadership team turn over and people don't kind of know how to do that job? That's not very productive. So I think, honestly, I'm not thrilled that you can, I'd like to find a solution for Michelle. I think it's the right thing to do. And frankly, I'm not sure who would be, unless we bought a year with Dana and kicked the can down the street to see if we can find a solution later. This doesn't feel great that you can kind of keep, unless it's a position as opposed to a person. Like in the business one, you want fresh blood, right? You want that. So I don't know if we're saying, do we want a term limit to this?
So maybe there's a third path here that we explore. Maybe there's an adjustment to the bylaws that specifically defines the number of terms in a lifetime a person can serve, so that maybe it is 6 years if they serve 3 one-year terms, and then but no one could ever serve more than 6. I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to get out of the box a little bit. And how do we take care of a short-term issue and have a path to a long-term solution?
Would it be worth reaching out to another board if there's a contact? I mean, I can't imagine this is a first-time scenario.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, Chris. I actually have a meeting scheduled with the director of Kentuckiana Works in Louisville next week. Yeah, next week. To just talk to him about, he's active nationally with a number of workforce things, and so I just kind of wanted to get to know him better, Michael Gritton. So, and I actually talk to all the directors, right now on a every other week basis. So it's a good point. Happy to ask, how they typically handle these things, and I can go back into the WIOA law, as well. I mean, when we revised the bylaws fairly recently this year, some of it was sort of checking to compare, what the law required versus this. So happy to revisit what the law might say about some of these things too. I mean, and I can even do that, just before even tomorrow, just to make sure that we're just aware of all the various requirements that we have. So that's a good point.
And one thought, just thinking out loud, and I mean, I suppose it would require a bylaw amendment to accomplish this, but if you wanted to kind of thread that needle between, on the one hand, not allowing folks to serve in perpetuity and consolidate power, if you will, while on the other, providing for, legitimate strategic succession planning for our leadership. I wonder if there couldn't be an exception where, as in the case with Michelle, someone is getting ready to term out, yet they are slated to serve in an officer's role. If that is the case, we would allow a renomination for an additional 2-year term so they can serve in that officer's role. And I think you can create a rational justification for that, in that, 6 years isn't necessarily a really long time to become intimately aware with an organization and to get to a position that you can effectively serve as a leader. So I think you can, say there's a rational purpose in allowing someone to serve their full, 6 years, but then, perhaps have a renomination and an opportunity to serve in a, discrete officer's position, as, Michelle will be looking at doing right now.
I would like to comment, if that's okay with all of you, about Nick's comment. And Nick, I really appreciate that. One of the things I noted in the bylaws is that someone who is going to serve as the chair does have to have previously served as a committee chair. So based on that requirement, if someone served as a committee chair and then vice chair and then chair, if all the terms were 2-year terms, that's their entire 6-year term.
Yeah. Do you have to serve as vice chair though?
You do not.
Okay. But agreed, that's still 2 years of understanding what is this board, what am I supposed to do? And then 2 years of taking on the additional responsibility of leading a committee. And then, your one and only chance now to be chair if that's what you want and that's what they want for you. And that's it. So yeah. I like that. What I wanted to make sure though is we address the point Dave brought up earlier about the positions that are role in nature. So what positions from that spreadsheet, is it the green lines that are must-haves that, or help me understand, like on the business side, those are nice to haves. I mean, having someone who's committed, like Michelle, for example, we want that energy, we want to keep that as long as possible. But also prevent via bylaws from this becoming entrenched, and then you never get fresh blood and new perspectives and new energy and different ideas. But I would imagine that in some cases, like Ryan Henson, there is no alternate organization, or the bylaws require that organization be a member.
Correct. So I can actually bring up the bylaws. I think that would be, well, yeah, it's probably in the bylaws. It's definitely in the law as well. So it's a little bit less straightforward than, would be ideal in terms of like who's required. So there are a few cases where, whoops, sorry. Okay. Let me see if it's up here. Okay. So if you look at, and the law gets into this more specifically. So we have to have someone, if you look at number 5, for example, so members representing entities administering education and training activities, including adult education and literacy and higher education. So they have to have those categories. So for adult education, there's really only one entity, which is Skills U. Higher education, so right now we have NKU, Gateway, and unless, as long as the board approves, UC would be represented. So we don't currently have anybody now from Thomas More University, but and then let's see, number 4, shall appoint workforce members representing labor organizations. So we have individuals that are doing that. Community-based organizations with expertise in addressing the employment of needs of individuals with barriers to employment, including organizations that serve veterans or support competitive integrated employment for individuals with disabilities. So that's Ryan through Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. Organizations with expertise in addressing employment, training, or education needs of eligible youth. So that's actually what Randy Poe is under that category with the Education Council, as well as
I'm sorry,
Katrina.
just real quick, you mentioned
Katrina too.
Ryan Henson fits into which section? Number 4?
Number 4, because of individuals with disabilities, because he's from the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation.
But we do not include him in that 20% count. That we just look at blue.
Oh, well, okay.
The green is
maybe
government economic development.
So okay, so we have him in. Yeah, it's a really good point. Oh, actually, I'm so sorry. So actually, he falls under number 6. Including the Office of Employment and Training. So that's Connie Schnell and the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation.
Okay. All right.
Sorry. So I guess we're supposed to also have someone else that's working with people with disabilities as well, which to my knowledge, we do not.
I think we talked about that before as the in addition to and the shalls, or if we're covering that somewhere else, we don't need it. We don't need to stretch ourselves twice to force compliance.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, so he's under number 6.
Okay, so there are specific offices called out. I would say there's specific types called out, and there may be multiple choices among that, but in some cases there are not. So I wonder if we could satisfy with Dave's language that there's an exception defined as if no additional organizations or individuals meet the criteria, the member shall be eligible to be renominated indefinitely.
Right, because in Ryan's case, for just example, this person is also supposed to be someone who has a leadership role in their organization, like a certain level of decision making. And so he's the regional manager for that office, and he serves actually Bluegrass and a couple of other regions as well. There are other staff, obviously, but there's really just not anybody else from that team who I would say was really in like a decision making role, like he is. And it's kind of a unique situation. Connie is really kind of the same situation. By the way, at some point we should when next time we update the bylaws, we should update the name of Connie's office because it has slightly changed, but that happened since we updated them the last time. And I don't know that they're finished updating things yet. So I wouldn't necessarily push to change the bylaws just for that. But next time we go through that process, we can do it. She switched cabinets. So you would like me, it sounds like, to draft some kind of language, John, or did you have a specific? I mean, I know you said a couple things, but
I'm just writing my own notes down a little bit to look at that.
Okay,
but for the renewal piece, I just want to make sure we have the caveat to allow. I like Dean's suggestion of lifetime term limits, although I'm a little curious when I heard that. Dave, how many years have you been on the WIB?
A while.
I think we'd have to do it moving forward.
Grandfather?
So I think I joined John in 08 or 09, something like that. So maybe 12 years.
1908?
Touche. Okay.
So technically that was the WIA board. It wasn't the WIOA board.
Yeah, I joined before it all became a political football. Okay. Yeah, but I did drop off actually, though. I did drop off somewhere around 2012 or 13. And then Toyota had another member there for 2 or 3 or 4 years.
When were you chair, Dave?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but I think it was kind of toward 2009 or 2010. When was the high performing designation awarded? It was
High
in that
impact.
period. Okay.
Okay, I can look and see. Yeah, I can look and see.
But yeah. So just to continue the conversation, what will we do tomorrow on this with the executive committee? Will we just talk about this and get their opinion?
I think that's the best we can offer right now, is to
Okay.
bring things to in front of them and advise of possibilities and pitfalls and go from there.
So I'd like to direct everybody's attention to the chat for a moment. So John added a suggestion. I have a question. So not only is other qualifying organizations, but it's also sort of a matter of no other qualifying individuals within those organizations.
But is the leadership caveat stated specifically in the bylaws?
I think somewhere it says that ideally this is an individual who has a decision-making capacity. So maybe
yeah, so I think that's already been stated there. I don't think we need to restate that.
Okay. Cool.
And I don't know if this is the best language, Nick. Maybe you can wordsmith this a little more succinctly than I have, but I'm just trying to capture that we do have some requirements in terms of specifically named organizations, but also organizational types. And to Dave's point, obviously these are local bylaws for us, but if there's not another one of these available, then we can just continue until indefinitely.
Yeah, I think that this language, John, that you drafted is good, and certainly Nick can clean it up if you wish. The only thing is I'm still a little concerned about what Dean said, because I think it's true about getting into a situation where we just have a power base that becomes unbearable, because that did happen with the WIBs a long time ago, I think. I'd like to get some language in there that in the Toyota world, we always used sometimes the language of case by case. So it's not a precedent that we're setting indefinitely, but if there's a need that presents itself, then it is allowed. Otherwise, if we stuck with this without an exception, then I think we do go down the road of becoming an organization that never has any openings for new blood, or we can't meet our diversity goals like.
So are you proposing, I guess the question is, there's nothing permitting someone resubmitting, being renominated to the board after their 3 two-year terms have expired. So we certainly have the ability to control that just by how we practice.
Right.
What we do. But to prevent abuse of that, the idea of lifetime totals, would it be fair just to simply say that you can go through that cycle twice in your lifetime and that's it? That would be 12 years on the WIB for someone who doesn't come from an organization that there is no one like them. That's a long time.
Yeah, it is.
No matter how great you are, there's always time to step aside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and obviously, in this, let's say Michelle's case, if she were renominated and came back in and the clock started afresh, she would not need to stay for 12 years. I mean, she can decide not to continue her term or, be renewed for her term. So if she wanted to stay on for chair or as chair in that role, in that capacity, and that was kind of what she wanted to do, that fits. So, I mean, I feel like that's a nice balance to this, is that there's total of 12 or 6 terms.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that, because as you pointed out, if somebody has a desire to be the board chair, it's mathematically sometimes impossible for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that does give us an opportunity to grow our talent as a board also.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I like it.
I do think, though, the suggestion for you to reach out to another board was a good suggestion, Tara. And I know Michael from some of the past dealings. He has had to have had this problem in Louisville.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think probably, I've had other conversations with some of the other directors over the last few months, just trying to get to know them and build rapport. We used to have in-person monthly meetings, but haven't since March. So, I only had the benefit of going to 2 or 3 of those. And so I have been systematically kind of working through the lists about just having Zoom meetings. I'm actually going to be in Louisville, so I'm actually going to get to meet with him in person, which is nice, but socially distance, of course. I definitely think from a Louisville standpoint, it will be interesting to see, because I do have a feeling, I mean, they have other complications that we do not have in terms of being across 2 states and some other things. So it's not a direct match. But I just think there definitely are some economic similarities that it will be good to talk to him about how they handle things. My counterpart in Lexington, by the way, is just about as new as I am, but she had been working there previously, so I plan to talk to her. Name's Amy Glasscock, and actually, Dave, I think have you met her?
Yeah, I know.
Navigo.
Yeah, and
yeah.
They reached out when the Bluegrass Board was having all the legal problems. Yeah. The thing I like about the Kentuckiana is that they play by the rules like we wish to do, and they've got the same talent pool that is driven by being successful rather than the good old boy network. So I think they're a great benchmark. Good.
I'm glad you agree with that. That's helpful. I know Janice Urbanic strongly recommended that I get in touch with Michael, so I'm excited to talk. Yeah. Cool. I'm not seeing, this is in case you haven't seen it, this is my WIOA law binder. So it's, kind of big, but it does have technically a table of contents. I think it's about 10 pages long. So I have been trying to flip through the table of contents in the book to try to find the part of the law that talks about this topic, but I will find that when I put my reading glasses on, and have it for you by tomorrow for that meeting. So sorry, it's the type is so small, so it's really hard to read. Here they are.
So I want to make sure we're respectful of time here. So there was sort of a primary reason for this meeting tomorrow was about the leadership turnover.
Yep.
I think we're going to present a solution to this problem, which is to allow Michelle to be renominated, and that plan can continue as was in there. The only other roll-off of the leadership team from a term expiration standpoint is Michelle Tyson. So I think that really should not be a challenge to find someone willing. Well, hopefully there's not a challenge to find someone willing to fulfill that capacity.
Yeah.
All other members of the executive team are in one of their earlier terms, so there's not a risk of that. So I don't think any major action at this point needs to be taken on what was initially the, I can't say that if we're being recorded, the oh darn thing that we saw as was coming up. So, but I think we're going to focus instead on the idea that we have a lifetime term limit of 6 total and a sort of the exception, which is the indefinite renewal for the organizational type. And with those two things into the bylaws, we've given the board flexibility to operate in, you know, the best and most impactful way possible, but also preventing it from being an old boys club. Fair? Okay. So then we didn't go through I want to do one quick thing on the membership attendance spreadsheet. I did resend that document. I noticed that the committee tabs had not been, there was some manual color coding as opposed to the tools I had put in the first time. So
Okay.
there's not much, just so you have that moving forward. The only thing that I saw is on the business services committee, and Dave, you are the chair for that. I didn't see what was present in that regard. Or did you have that meeting on the 21st?
We did.
Yes.
It should have been in there, but maybe I pulled it from the wrong place. So we will double check that.
Okay, because that
We
one
had
you
very good
had
attendance.
14 RSVP'd with 8 quorums, so that's fantastic. And then there's not really a lot of look back. For the executive committee, we canceled because there wasn't really any action to take.
Correct.
Program and youth had the pretty big meeting, made quorum on that. So actually, I don't know why that's not showing up, but anyway. So just, I want to make sure that we at least check the box that we reviewed that and it all looks pretty good.
It's working really well.
Okay.
So to John's question, do I need to go in and update this form, Tara, or will
No.
you?
Yeah, it's not your job to update the form. This is on
Okay.
We'll do it.
Okay.
I think I must have maybe pulled, I don't know exactly how that happened, but we kept the attendance and you had excellent attendance at the meeting. So I'm not sure exactly, maybe I pulled like the wrong one or something into the folder because
I know that this note and the conclusion of the meeting came within a day of each other. So that might have been the problem too.
yeah, we've actually been doing it real time during the meeting because it's so much easier to use than the old one. So I'm not sure exactly what happened, but we will remedy that. But in terms of just knowing, there was excellent attendance at that particular meeting, which is good.
And one final comment on that. There's, for Ryan Henson, it was noted as excused. I want to get away from the language of excused and unexcused absences. You're there, you're not there. So
Okay.
I don't want to. It was once written as unexcused, and it caused quite a bit of a tiff, and there's no value in it. So even the maybe for Dr. Poe, unless you're using this as did I call this person or not, because it's blank. I don't even see a lot of value in the maybe side. So
I think that was more for us as a staff as we were judging if we were going to have quorum for that particular meeting. So maybe we can just go back in and delete those notes afterwards. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point that it causes confusion after, but it was a thing just so we could make sure.
That's fair. I'm just trying to caution against creeping back into the complexity of 14 different codes and all that we just left away from. So
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
good point. Very good point.
That covering our agenda, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion right away.
Dave. A second?
Second.
Nick. I'm going to assume we're all in favor, so I'll call this meeting adjourned.
All right,
Right,
thanks.
that's correct.
Good meeting
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thanks very
Take
much. I
care.
appreciate the dialogue.